Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to the Federal Fiscal Year 2021 Clean Water State Revolving Fund and Drinking Water State Revolving Fund Intended Use Plans Public Workshop. My name is Haiti Yonamine with the State Water Board's Office of Public Participation, and I will be facilitating today's workshop. This workshop is being webcast publicly at video.calipa.ca.gov. We are also recording today's workshop and will post it on the State Water Board's website for anyone who may have not been able to join us today. This workshop is for informational purposes and no formal action will be taken. The State Water Board's mission is to preserve, enhance, and restore California's water resources for the benefit of present and future generations, which is why we want to begin this workshop by acknowledging the groups who have and who continue to experience economic, environmental, and social disadvantages as a result of historical marginalization and whose daily lives are impacted by racism and injustices. As a reminder, our work here today should strengthen the empowerment of Indigenous and community voices as we work together to provide clean, safe, affordable water to all Californians. We have quite a few participants joining us today on Zoom. Okay, sorry, I apologize. I had to mute myself because the garbage the garbage truck was just passing by, so I apologize. All right, so we have a couple, quite a few folks joining us on Zoom today and by phone. We'll be starting things off with some meeting logistics. I'm going to direct you to a few Zoom features and we will be using today. You should have a taskbar at the bottom of your screen. Here you will find your mute, unmute button, video and off button, a button to open the participants box, and a chat feature button and a reactions icon to raise your hand. So let's start with the participants box. Please click on the participants button. This will open a participants panel that shows you the names of folks who have joined our workshop today via Zoom. The participants panel will also help us locate you when you have raised your hand. All right, next, let's raise our hands. The raise hand feature can be found in the reactions button, which you'll want to use during the question and answer session if you have a question or a comment. If you're joining by phone, you can raise your hand by entering *9 on your keypad. So let's see, I do see some raised hands. Let's see if we can get more folks to raise their hand. You can find the icon, the reactions icon at the bottom of your taskbar. And okay, I do see some hands raised. Great. Thank you. And thank you for that thumbs up. All right, thank you for raising your hands. Now that you know how to raise your hand, let's try the chat feature. Click on the chat button and the window should open. In that window, please type your answer to the following question. How many cups of coffee have you had today? Okay, I see some coffee drinkers, some non-coffee drinkers. That's great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Finally, if our presentation is too big for your screen, please set your view option to exit full screen. Typically, a taskbar is found at the top of the screen, but it can also be found at the bottom of your Zoom window. For folks watching the live video stream at video.calipa.ca.gov, Please note there is usually a 30 to 60-second lag between the Zoom workshop and the webcast. To improve streaming quality, folks participating on the Zoom platform will have their videos turned off and microphones muted during the presentation. There will be an opportunity to ask questions and provide comments after the presentation. At that time, if you'd like to speak, please raise your hand through the reactions icon on the taskbar at the bottom of your screen. If you're calling in, raise your hand by pressing *9 on your keypad. Questions will be taken in the order they were received. When it's your turn, your name will be announced and you will be asked to unmute yourself. For those watching the live webcast, you can email your question or comment with the subject as 2021-22 workshop to drinkingwatersrf@waterboards.ca.gov for the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, or cleanwatersrf@waterboards.ca.gov for the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. The presentation of the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund intended use plan is available at our website at https://bit.ly/DWSRF_2021_22_IUP. Again, this workshop is being recorded and will be posted on the State Water Board's website. We want to thank each of you for finding a way to join us today. We're doing our best to make sure that everyone can participate in an effective way and that this time is valuable for you. I'd like to review some guidelines. We ask that you mute yourself if you're not speaking. This is a 3-hour workshop and we have scheduled a break in between, but please take breaks as you need them. In case you get disconnected, please rejoin the Zoom workshop or watch the live webcast. And finally, if you need any technical assistance, please email drinkingwatersrf@waterboards.ca.gov. If you're on Zoom, you can raise your hand or type it into the chat function on the Zoom on the bottom of your screen. And if you're calling in, you can also raise your hand by entering *9 for any technical assistance. We have staff from the Division of Financial Assistance presenting today who will be introduced in a moment. We also have staff working behind the scenes to make sure that we have as few participation bumps as possible. We would like to thank them for making this workshop possible. Now, I'd like to introduce Mike Downey. Mike Downey is the supervising engineer in the State Water Board's Division of Financial Assistance and oversees both the Drinking Water and Clean Water State Revolving Fund programs. Mike?
Thanks, Haiti. My name is Mike Downey, as Haiti mentioned. I'm a supervising engineer with DFA. And on behalf of Leslie Loudon, our Deputy Director, and State Water Board, I'd like to thank everyone for coming to our annual Intended Use Plan workshop. Workshop number 1 was held 2 weeks ago, and we have a repeat presentation for you today, and are looking forward to any of your questions. So I did want to start off by mentioning that one thing on people's minds, which is there's some other sources of funding that are being floated out there, and people are wondering how they might interact with these IUPs. Many of you have probably heard of the American Rescue Plan approved by President Biden in early March. There's also been some talk about state revolving fund reauthorization or additional stimulus from Washington. But a lot of that is simply unknown at the moment. The American Rescue Plan, for instance, included about $190 billion for state COVID recovery. Some of those uses was for necessary investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure, which definitely overlaps with things that we fund here in the Division of Financial Assistance. But at this point, we can't say with any certainty what additional funding is exactly coming to the Water Board. You're probably familiar with the state budget process, and I believe the May revise is being released later today, maybe while we're in this workshop. So we're keeping an eye on that, and hopefully it becomes clear in the near future what type of funds might be coming to Division of Finance, the State Water Board, to be administered by DFA. And but at this point, it's a little premature to figure out exactly how those funds will interact with our SRF programs and these intended use plans. So one thing I'll mention is that those of you that were around in 2009 might recall the ARA funding, and DFA staff went to the board about 3 times as part of rolling out those funds and getting authorizations and priorities established. So we anticipate that we will likely go to the board again as any additional funding that we might receive becomes more clear, whether that's to amend the IUPs or get other resolutions passed. So at this point, with the intended use plans, we're really focused on the funds we know are available, that are for certain for this year, and we're just going to have to play by ear a bit as additional funds may become available. So I'm sure you'll know as soon as we know if that changes, and we're definitely keeping our eye on that, and we'll try to keep everyone up to date. So with that, I did see our Deputy Director, Leslie Loudon, is on the call, and I did want to give her a chance to speak if she was interested, but sorry, Leslie, to put you on the spot, and if not, I'll go ahead and kick off the next piece. Hi, Leslie.
Hi, Mike. I'm glad to say a few words and just thank everybody for attending the workshop. And I did want to actually maybe contradict you and give a little bit of information that we have about the governor's budget and the May revised proposal, and also let people know about a webinar that's going to be happening this afternoon. So the governor's May revised proposal does propose an additional $1.3 billion for drinking water and wastewater infrastructure. So that money will be administered by the State Water Board, and we'll be, working to develop guidelines and figure out how to administer that program. There's also $150 million for water recycling and groundwater cleanup, $20 million for drinking water to assist systems with PFAS and PFOA impacts, and also $1 billion to assist water systems that have arrearages that have developed from folks that weren't able to pay their water bills during the COVID pandemic. So the governor will be rolling this out, and this afternoon at 3 o'clock, the Secretary of Cali, PA, Secretary of Natural Resources, Wade Crowfoot, Secretary of Food and Agriculture, Karen Ross, and our Secretary of Cali, PA, Jared Blumenfeld, will be holding a webinar to talk about the May revised budget proposal and the California comeback proposal that the governor will be releasing. So I just wanted to let people know that it's very exciting times with all this money for infrastructure, and buckle your seatbelts. We've got a lot of work to do going forward. So thanks, Mike. That's what I wanted to say. Pass it back to you.
Thanks, Leslie. That is exciting. Our IUP will not reflect all those funds yet, but
Nope.
we won't likely be addressing that before the June board meeting to present the IUP to board members. But like Leslie said, we will be rolling out, figuring out what we need to do to roll out guidelines and other documents to encumber those funds. With that, I will take us briefly through our agenda today. So we, in a moment here, I'm going to do some introductions of our speakers. We'll have the drinking water presentation first, followed by a question and answer period, at which point we'll take a break and we'll come back for the Clean Water SRF presentation at 11 o'clock. So if you're only interested in that one, just know we will start that at 11. Again, followed by question and answers, and then our plan is to adjourn by 12:30. So our presenters for the drinking water portion today are Wintrin Lee. She is a senior engineer, DFA, overseeing the drinking water SRF program, and Bridget Chase, who's a supervising engineer, part of the Office of Sustainable Water Solutions, working with our small and disadvantaged communities. So with that, I will turn it over to Win. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the workshop, workshop number 2. So thank you for taking your time to join us today. And my name is Wintrin Lee. I am the senior engineer, chief of the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund Technical Unit. And I will present to you the Drinking Water SRF IUP Drinking Water State Revolving Fund Intended Use Plan, and highlight what new this year. So here is a preview of the topics that I will talk about for drinking water. Some background and IUP basics. I will briefly discuss the financial outlook and development of the comprehensive list and the fundable list. And as usual, I will point out what are the same as last year and what new this year. I will also talk about the additional supplemental appropriations for the Disaster Relief Act in 2019, or better known as SWRCB funds program, and for the small community fundings, as well as the remaining items, Ms. Chase from the Office of Sustainable Water Solution will cover. And as Mike mentioned, after that, we will open for comments and questions. So as you may already know, the Drinking Water SRF were established in 1996 by the Safe Drinking Water Act Amendment to provide low interest loan and some principal forgiveness to public water system for drinking water system improvement. And Congress appropriates funds to US EPA, and US EPA would then allocate funds to states based on the infrastructure needs of each state. And the state needs are documented in the Drinking Water Infrastructure Needs Survey and Assessment that is conducted every 4 years. So the survey assessment is currently ongoing this year after a 2 years delay, and we have been contacting many systems selected for the survey to gather documentation to help us complete the questionnaire. So for this round of survey, EPA is looking for additional information on lead service lines and water operator workforce. So I want to thank many of you who have been supportive to the state on this effort over the years, and we are looking forward to another successful year in 2021. Clearly, if you look at the needs that was documented, and the last one that was done in 2015, you can see that the needs in California are much greater than the federal grants that we receive. And recognizing that, the state of California has provided several other funds to complement the Drinking Water SRF. These complementary funding sources generally would follow the Drinking Water SRF policy and the IUP. And as Leslie and Mike had mentioned, There's more additional funds will be coming to the State Water Board from the American Rescue Plan, so more to come on that. We also have the safe and affordable funding for equity and resilience, or SWRCB drinking water program. And one of the funds in this program was the Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Funds that were established by Senate Bill 200 back in July 2019. And this will be used in conjunction with the Drinking Water SRF to complement the State Water Board existing suite of financial assistance programs. In addition, with on those funds and the Drinking Water SRF program focused on 3 priorities. So projects are prioritized accordingly to address the most serious public health risk problems, to ensure compliance with the Safe Drinking Water Act requirements, and assist those most in need on a per household affordability basis. I won't go much into the basics here, but I want to point out that the draft Drinking Water SRF IUP has been posted at the location shown here, and I hope you have had a chance to view it. You can also go to the board comments page, which also has a link to the Drinking Water SRF program to view the IUP. And the State Water Board will submit this IUP as part of its application for the federal fiscal year in 2021 capitalization grant to US EPA. The IUP contains elements required under federal law. So one of the requirements is to establish the State Water Board business plan for the Drinking Water SRF and its associated state funding program. So this includes the discussion of finance, staffing, resources, and goals, approach, and requirements. And we will go over or highlight some of them later today. So who are eligible for these fundings? Eligible applicants have remained relatively the same, namely any publicly owned community water systems, any privately owned community water system, and nonprofit, non-community water system, provided that they can meet all the Drinking Water SRF requirements. However, eligibility may depend on applicant type and the funding source that would be used to fund for the project. With the funding can be used to cover for eligible costs, including planning documents, project design, construction and construction management, administration, and for preparing environmental documentation. With the, so I'm gonna go over some of the financial outlook and fund availability. Currently we have the IUP will discuss these in more detail, but basically DFA analyzed the funding data and projections and has determined that the sustainable funding capacity for the Drinking Water SRF is approximately 330 million in loan per year. In addition, there will be approximately 151 million in principal forgiveness that will be available for the federal fiscal year 2021. And this includes the principal forgiveness portion from the 2021 CAP grant and any remaining principal forgiveness from prior years that have not been committed. In addition, the ASATRA funds available currently is 46 million. And furthermore, we have the complementary funds around 155 million from a combination of Proposition 1 and Proposition 68. And the safe and affordable drinking water funds is also one of the complementary funds, and detail will be in the expenditure plans posted on DFA website. So here is a snapshot of what we had as of March 1st of 2021. There was 24 agreements executed by the Drinking Water SRF and complementary funds for a total of 167 million. Additionally, there are also 33 agreements are in progress at various stages toward execution for another 173 million. And we anticipate that many will be executed by June 30th of this year. Here is a summary of the comprehensive comprehensive list, which is the list of all of the applications that submitted to DFA for funding. As of February of 2021, we have a total of 345 applications for almost 3.4 billion in requested financing. And of these, 270 projects are from the small DAC, small SDAC, and other system with problem ranks in categories A to C or consolidation project for approximately 637 million. One of the reasons we kind of separate these projects out is that they potentially may be eligible for some principal forgiveness or grant funding. And besides, we also have 21 projects that was on the fundable list from last year for 1.3 billion that will be rolling over to this fiscal year. And many of these may receive a funding agreement by the end of the fiscal year. And there are also 54 projects for about 1.45 billion that we received, and they have been ranked for placement on the fundable list. So it's briefly going over, how a project would be placed on the fundable list. We have here the fundable list is the list of projects that DFA identifies as most ready for financing by the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30th, 2022. And there are really two sublists as shown here, as I have just described in previously, that all of the small DAC or SDAC, expanded small DAC and other small non-DAC, non-DAC with the public health problem rank in category A to C, those are automatically on the fundable list, provided that they submit complete applications. Other repairable loan projects will be prioritized by their problems and the readiness to proceed. And so with that process, we have a list of the repairable loan project, or the fundable list currently has 35 projects. I'm going to give Mike a second to move. Here we go. All right. So here is a summary of what we have on the fundable list for repairable loan projects. We have 35 projects with an estimated request requested loan financing of 1.56 billion. And as you can see, most of these projects are from large water system construction projects, 30 of them in total for 1.52 billion here. There's also some like 33.75 million in grants that are estimated funding for a few specific projects and for a starter project. These are separate from the complementary funds that were shown in previous slides. So with on that, what remained the same over the year here, we have the match financing still available. If you are interested in local match financing, please contact us. The application process remains the same, and we accept application continuously. Once you submit an application, a package, we'll assign a staff to assist and review your application as they come in. And it's important to repeat that a project on the fundable list is not a guarantee of funding. A project must meet all eligibility criteria for funding at the time of funding execution. Again, on small DAC and small SDAC are automatically on the fundable list, and the funding could be used, retroactive for planning and design, and still the same. And past project planning and design costs remain eligible, and you all know costs must be documented for reimbursement. So what else remains the same here? We offer extended financing term for planning, either 5-year or 10-year term at the applicant request. And extended construction financing term is still 40 years for DAC or SDAC or project useful life. And for all other projects, it would be 30 years or project useful life, whichever is shorter. And the loan repayment is in annual repayment. The first principal and interest repayment will be due 12 months after project completion for non-DAC project, and due 18 months after project completion for DAC or SDAC. We also, the prepayment would require the DFA Deputy Director approval. So what else is the same? The major change that we made last year was to streamline the final budget approval process. And this seemed to be very helpful to allow recipients access and the ability to draw construction funds sooner. So project budget will still be finalized on the outset in the agreement and eliminate the mandatory amendment step associated with the final budget approval, or often here heard of as an FBA process. So agreement may still be amended for cost increase or for other changes there. And for small disadvantaged community and small severely disadvantaged community, funding criteria remain relatively the same as last IUP, but more detail will be provided by Ms. Chase in the second portion of the drinking water presentation. There's some news or changes that we have this year that I want to draw your attention to, that is the non-equivalency environmental review. This has been extended to include the planning projects, the expanded small DAC and SDAC construction projects, and certain non-transient water system projects serving a DAC or SDAC, as well as small non-DAC construction projects in categories A to C, and all of the ASADRA projects. These will help move their project, review and process of the application. Hopefully will be a bit faster, as these projects will have CEQA only environmental review applied to them. So for the ASADRA project, as you know, this became law on June 6th of 2019, and the ASADRA provides additional funding for water and wastewater infrastructure system projects that were affected by a specific natural disaster. And for California, it is mainly for wildfires and earthquakes that occur in 2018 calendar year. And the State Water Board is submitting a revised supplemental IUP to apply for additional reallotment of about $4,253,000, which would bring the available funds for ASADRA to $46,339,000. And more information on the supplemental IUP is on Appendix H. So for ASADRA program eligible project, for more detail, we refer to the October 23rd, 2019 memo from US EPA at the site indicated here. Eligible system are the public water system that affected by the 2018 calendar year disaster. And ASADRA funds are available to help. Mostly these are wildfire and earthquake there. All of the existing requirements for drinking water SRF program are applicable to ASADRA projects as well. There is also a memorandum of understanding between FEMA and US EPA that indicates that receiving ASADRA funding will not affect FEMA eligibility, which has been a concern for some of the entities that are affected by these wildfire and earthquake here. The term that we offer for ASADRA project will be 30% of principal forgiveness, up to $3 million, and loan will be offered at 0% interest for the remaining balance of the project. Repayment would be the same as with the drinking water SRF, which is 30 years for non-DAC and 40 years for DAC or useful life of the project. So with that, I just want to go over some of the updates on the program, the current status. We have the fundable list currently includes 7 agency applications as shown in Appendix H for a total cost estimate of $60 million. And project was prioritized based on complete applications as of January 31st, 2021. Funding priority will be based on if a project could start construction by the end of this year. If a project serves a small DAC, a small SDAC, and the problem they're trying to solve would be, a health-based ranking. And per a DFA memo dated September 30th of 2020, The CWSRF only environmental review will be applied to the entire project. And now I would like to turn it over to Ms. Chase from the Office of Sustainable Water Solution, who will go over the small disadvantaged community. With that, Bridget.
Thank you, Wynn. Again, my name is Bridget Chase, and I'm a supervising engineer in the Office of Sustainable Water Solutions. So my slides are going to go over small community funding information available in the Drinking Water SRF Intended Use Plan. Before I go over the funding details, however, I would like to go over some definitions that will be used in the upcoming slides. For drinking water projects, a small community is considered a community of 10,000 or less people or 3,300 connections or less. We further define an expanded small community as a community between 10 and 20,000 people or 3,300 and 6,600 connections. A community is considered disadvantaged if their median household income, or MHI, is less than 80% of the statewide MHI. A community with an MHI less than 60% of the statewide MHI is considered a severely disadvantaged community, or SDAC. Small DAC applications are included in the comprehensive list, but not included on the fundable list in the IUP, as Wynn mentioned. This is because small DACs are automatically added to our fundable list no matter when they submit their application. Applications for small DACs, expanded small DACs, and small non-DAC applications for category A through C projects do not need to be ranked or scored to be added to the list. This includes the projects that are eligible for grant and principal forgiveness funding per Appendix E of the IUP. Grant and/or principal forgiveness funding may be available for small DACs, expanded small DACs, and category A through C projects for non-DACs. For small non-DACs. Small and expanded small DACs may also be eligible for reduced interest rates for loan funding. Priority will be given to projects that address the most serious human health risks, or category A through C projects and consolidation projects. So category A through C projects generally include projects that address compliance violations or water shortages, and those could be identified a little bit further in the Drinking Water SRF policy if you're curious what fits under that. We also offer technical assistance to small water systems to help with such things as application assistance, public outreach, rate studies, and sometimes even the planning necessary to apply for construction funding. As Wynn mentioned in slide number 19, the draft intended use plan includes CEQA only review for small DACs, expanded small DACs, and small non-DACs with category A through C construction projects. So again, those listed in that Appendix E. Requiring a CEQA only review for these projects should speed up the application processing time. Small DACs that still need to complete the necessary planning to move forward with a selected construction project, such as a feasibility report and environmental documents, can apply for planning funding. We no longer have included a cap for planning grants, but rather there is a maximum amount of grant or principal forgiveness per community in a given 5-year period. So this includes any planning, technical assistance, and construction that community receives through the Drinking Water SRF program. Details about planning grants and principal forgiveness available can be found in Appendix D of the draft intended use plan. The feasibility report required for construction funding requires applicants to evaluate consolidation of the subject system with nearby water systems. If consolidation is deemed infeasible, the applicant must discuss the reasons for that determination. If the consolidation is determined to be the most feasible alternative, then grant or principal forgiveness funding will only be available for a consolidation project. The 2 next slides include grant eligibility for construction projects. This information can be found in Appendix E of the IUP. As I mentioned a couple slides back, we are prioritizing projects that address the most serious human health risks, or category A through C projects. These higher priority projects may receive up to $60,000 per service connection for grant. This table shows the percentage of project costs that may be eligible for grant or principal forgiveness based on the type of community the project will serve. So as you can see, small DACs and small severely disadvantaged communities and eligible non-transient non-communities such as public schools may receive up to 100% grant for their project. Expanded small DACs and small non-disadvantaged water systems with these higher category A through C projects may receive up to 75% grant or principal forgiveness. This slide shows grant eligibility for category D through F projects with priority given to consolidation projects. These projects are eligible for up to $45,000 per connection. So as you noticed in the previous slide, it was $60,000. So these lower category ones have a lower cap. Small DACs are eligible for a higher grant percentage. For most of these systems, we also will be looking at the residential water rates as a percentage of the community's median household income to determine if the system is grant eligible or not. Small non-DACs are not eligible for grant or principal forgiveness for these lower category projects. The funding caps and eligible grant percentages are proposed to remain the same as last year's intended use plan. Grant and principal forgiveness funding caps are per residential service connection and apply to the total amount of grant or principal forgiveness funding a community receives from planning, technical assistance, and construction in a 5-year period. Because our focus and priority is on the projects that address the most serious health risks, we have included a higher cap, as I mentioned before, for those A through C projects. We also realize that projects for smaller systems that have fewer than 45 connections have a difficult time meeting those funding caps. So the draft intended use plan allows for up to $2 million in grant or principal forgiveness, regardless of the per connection limits. As of last year, small non-DACs with category A through C projects may also receive grant funding for their projects. In addition, there's groundwater grant program funding that may be available to public water systems serving disadvantaged communities or severely disadvantaged communities for projects that prevent and clean up contamination of groundwater that serves or has served as a source of drinking water. These funds will be administered consistent with appendices D and E, except that the groundwater grant program funds may be available for projects benefiting disadvantaged communities with water rates of at least 1.5% of their median household income, regardless of the number of connections or the population served. So these grants may be awarded in addition to grants or principal forgiveness awarded through the Drinking Water SRF program. We plan to continue to incentivize consolidation projects, and we are proposing to expand on the incentives available this year. An incentive project is a project that will solely benefit the receiving water system and can include infrastructure improvements, operation and maintenance support, or potentially refinancing of existing loans. This incentive funding is in addition to any subsidized funding that the consolidation project may be eligible for. The draft intended use plan discusses how a system can apply for and receive the incentive funding. Ideally, the receiving water system should submit at least a partial application for their incentive project prior to execution of a funding agreement for construction of the consolidation project. The applicant for the incentive project should be application for the incentive project should be completed within a year after funding that consolidation. So we want the incentive project to be shortly funded after we actually do the physical consolidation. The draft intended use plan identifies 3 different ways that an applicant can qualify for an incentive project. When a full physical consolidation is complete, the receiving water system may receive up to $10 million in 0% financing. In addition, if the receiving water system consolidates a small DAC, they may receive up to $5,000 per connection in grant or principal forgiveness towards an incentive project, or they can, if they consolidate a severely disadvantaged community, a small severely disadvantaged, they may receive up to $10,000 per connection with a maximum of $5 million grant or principal forgiveness available. This year, we have added consolidation incentive for public water systems that managerially consolidate a system or provide an interconnection. The available incentive funding isn't as high as a full physical consolidation, but the receiving water system can receive up to $2 million in 0% financing for their incentive project. In addition, if the managerial consolidation or intertie is for a small DAC or SDAC, they may receive $2.5 thousand per connection or $5,000 per connection respectively, with the maximum grant for managerial consolidation or interconnection incentive capped at $1 million. The State Water Board may appoint an administrator to a public water system to provide administrative, technical, operational, legal, or managerial services, or any combination of those services, as well as full management and control of the aspects to a designated water system. Administrators may receive up to $5 million in 0% financing for an incentive project, or they may receive up to $2,500 per connection if they are an administrator for a small DAC, or $5,000 per connection if they are an administrator for a severely disadvantaged community. The maximum incentive grant available for an administrator would be $1 million. The Drinking Water SRF IUP was posted online for public comment. The deadline to submit written comments is noon on June 1st. You are attending workshop number 2, and we will be having DFA plans to take the Drinking Water SRF IUP to the June 15th board meeting for consideration of adoption. DFA plans to execute funding agreements for projects listed on the fundable list within a year, so by June 30th of 2022 then. If you would like to submit public comments on the draft Drinking Water SRF intended use plan, details can be found on the notice of opportunity to comment document. We have already received some written comments, so thank you to those that have already submitted. We will continue to receive written comments until noon on June 1st of 2021. And we encourage you to use the subject line of comment letter June 15th, 2021 board meeting Drinking Water SRF IUP, so that your comments aren't somehow lost. Many of us are currently working from home, so we encourage you to submit via email if you can to commentletters@waterboards.ca.gov, but you may also mail in your comments to the address on the screen. If you would like to verbally express your comments, you can at the June 15th board meeting. So that's going to be the last of my slides. I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to Haiti, but I will be available for questions at the end here. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget, and thank you, UN, for your presentations. Now we will transition to taking questions and comments from both the Zoom participants and from the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund email. As a reminder to folks participating on Zoom, please raise your hand or use the chat feature if you have a question or comment. You can raise your hand through the reactions icon or use the chat feature by scrolling down to the taskbar at the bottom of your screen. For those who are calling in, please press *9 on your keypad to raise your hand if you would like to ask a question or make a comment. I'll introduce you when it's your turn, and you can press *6 to unmute yourself. When your name is called, please provide your first and last name, who you're representing today, and please do your best to keep your question or comment to 3 minutes. For folks watching the live webcast, you can email your question or comment to drinkingwatersrf@waterboards.ca.gov with the subject as 2021-22 IUP workshop. In terms of procedure, I will start with the raised hands. Then we'll look at the chat box. Question or comment will be taken in the order they were received. When it is your turn, I will introduce you and you will receive a request through Zoom to unmute yourself. We kindly ask you to be mindful of the limited time we have here today and keep questions and comments succinct. After Zoom participants, we will take questions, comments from the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund email. In the event we are unable to take all of the questions from folks, you can also email us at drinkingwatersrf@waterboards.ca.gov, and staff will respond to those questions after the workshop. I'd like to introduce Mike, Yuan, and Bridget, who will be responding to questions. So we'll start with the raised hand. I do see a raised hand. Give me a second. Okay, Eric Orellana, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you, Haiti. And I want to say thank you to all the staff who helped make this presentation possible. Had a few questions, so I'll go ahead and just start off with the first one. And the first question is, can you help us understand how the Drinking Water State Revolve Fund, IUP, and Safer Fund expenditure plan will work together to inform project evaluation and implementation?
Thank you, Eric, for your question. If one of our presenters can respond to Eric.
Hi, Eric. I'm hoping Bridget could speak a little more to it, but yes, we do take, the staff in DFA work together on the fund expenditure plan and the intended use plan. The fund expenditure plan focusing on the safer funds that were mentioned, and then the IUP focusing on the Prop 1 and Prop 68 complementary funds, as well as obviously the SRF funds. But there is a strong focus on making sure those two plans work together, are similar in their priorities, and focused on both the small disadvantaged communities as well as those with the high risk problems and human health risk problems. I know that we are currently working on fund expenditure plan draft, and that should be posted here in a couple months. I don't know if Bridget, you have more details on that schedule, but I appreciate the comment that is a focus for Division of Financial Assistance to have those plans work together.
Yeah, this is Bridget. I will chime in just a little bit more. I think we're a little bit behind on the fund expenditure plan, but it should be posted, like Mike said, probably in the next couple months. And ideally, they should be really working very similarly together. So typically we'll have the one application that would be for the Drinking Water SRF program, and then we use whatever funding sources make sense as far as funding a project. The safer funding, the safe and affordable drinking water funding does have a little bit more flexibility, so we can do things like operation and maintenance and stuff like that we wouldn't be able to fund through the Drinking Water SRF program. So that's some of the ways that we might be able to use the different programs in order to fund what we need to for a project. I don't know if I answered your question. I didn't fully understand it.
Thank you, Bridget, and thank you, Mike, for responding to Eric's question. Eric, thank you for your question. So again, if you have any questions or comment, and then you're on the Zoom platform, go ahead and raise your hand using the reactions icon over to the right, and you can raise your hand. And those who are calling in, you can press *9. So I'll go ahead and give you a minute or two to gather your thoughts or comments so that you can raise your hand. And then again, for those who are watching the live webcast, you can email your question or comment to drinkingwatersrf@waterboards.ca.gov. John Erickson, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, this is John Erickson with Community Water Center. Thanks a lot for this presentation today and the opportunity to comment. One question we had is, in light of results from the needs assessment, which in some sections showed a higher per connection cost than the current $60,000 IUP per connection threshold, can you help us understand the thinking behind keeping that same threshold? Although we do understand there can be approval up to $80,000 per connection for good cause, but could you help us understand the thinking behind keeping that threshold? I guess it's been our experience that consolidation costs can easily surpass that threshold, and we're concerned that the continued use of the $60,000 or $80,000 threshold could result in point of use or point of entry treatment being applied to a large portion of the small water systems and domestic well areas that we're working with, despite some real challenges with the long-term sustainability of point of use and point of entry treatment. So would really appreciate your thoughts on that.
Yes, thank you, John. So as far as the caps, we've left them the same because the majority of the projects that we've been working on have fallen within those caps. There are a couple outliers, definitely, and we could take those projects to our board for approval in those cases. But the majority of projects that we have been working on have been within that 80,000 per connection. And that's why we kept it that way.
Thank you, Bridget, and thank you again, John, for your question. And also, I want to remind folks that you can use the chat feature to type in your question or comment as well. So feel free to do that. So let's see if we have any more raised hands. Feel free to raise your hand if you have a question or comment and you're on the Zoom platform. I see Melina. Melina, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thanks, Heidi. My name is Melina, and I'm from the Lahontan Water Board. I was just wondering if this plan in particular will be applicable or be used to address the SB 1215 efforts, the wastewater consolidation efforts.
So I could chime in on this. The drinking water SRF intended use plan definitely wouldn't be as far as with the wastewater consolidation efforts, but possibly the one that's going to be after this, the clean water intended use plan.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Bridget, and thank you, Melina, for your question. We don't see any more raised hands. Oh, I do see another one. Give me a second. So Eric, you're back again. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thanks, Heidi. Sorry, appreciate the opportunity to ask again. But the next question I had relates to just funding guidance that the IUP will have moving forward. My question relates to page 21 of the draft IUP and how it states that the system's owner's ability to pay will be considered for any work occurring on private property. Does the State Water Board, and the question is, does the State Water Board have, or could the State Water Board develop a clear and consistent methodology for assessing financial need or eligibility for state grant funding for work on private property, such as costs for laterals, well destruction, or backflow preventers associated with consolidation costs, and particularly for projects involving private domestic wells? For us, the language in the draft IUP is focused on a water system's ability to pay, and we believe that to move projects forward, it will be important to have a clear policy for what is required, and that any methods for determining financial eligibility not be excessively onerous or invasive for applicants. And so we want to make sure that eligibility requirements should not be so strict that the cost of this work on private property prevents consolidation projects from reaching all households and preventing really the success of a consolidation.
Thank you, Eric. This is Bridget. I'll go ahead and take this one as well. So as far as when we're talking about consolidation projects, any work that is necessary for the consolidation to take place, such as the backflow preventers and destruction of existing wells on the private property, we would consider that grant eligible without looking at the private for-profits ability to pay for that. So the ability to pay is going to come more when it might be stuff like the private owner has their distribution system within, like let's say it's a mobile home park, for example, within the mobile home park that needs to be completely replaced, that we would want to make sure that the private owner can't afford to do that work themselves. And then the other times that it would come into play would be if it's a lower category project, such as, maybe replacing the distribution system and not doing the consolidation, or if it's the category A through C project, but it's for treatment, then we'll also make sure that the owner wouldn't be able to afford it on their own. Does that make sense? Do you have further questions?
I appreciate that answer, Bridget. I guess we're mainly just trying to see if that means that a privately owned lateral who serves only a single household will be funded.
So are we talking about as far as for a consolidation project? Because if so, then we should be able to do that. The way that we've been doing it, though, is we will want to make sure that, like, if let's say there's 15 homes that are connecting that are currently on private wells, for example, we would want to make sure that those private individuals aren't able to afford it on their own. So we might look at their last tax information to show that they're a disadvantaged home themselves.
Okay, that's helpful to know. I think we were mainly wanting to know if what specific indices the State Water Board would use for affordability, just because in our experience, some have required things like IndyPay or others. So we're just trying to get a better sense of what that funding assessment or grant eligibility will entail. But thank you, really appreciate all the support, all the help.
Yeah, and at this point we are looking at stuff like IndyPay, but we're also looking to see if it makes the most sense for our program and if there's other ways that would make more sense to show that. But that's ideally what we're using that ability to pay analysis for, is to make sure that we're not giving that grant funding to a for-profit owner that could and should be able to do it themselves.
Thank you, Bridget, and thank you, Eric, for your questions. Let's see if we have any more raised hands. Go ahead, folks, if you have any questions or comment. Let's see. Let's see if there are anything else. So I don't see any more raised hands. And let me check the chat box now. No, I don't see any. I'll go ahead and give folks another minute or two for those who are watching the live webcast. If you do have a question or comment, we are taking them at this moment. You can email your question or comment to drinkingwatersrf@waterboards.ca.gov. I know that there is a 30 to 60 second lag between the workshop and the live webcast. So we'll go ahead and give you all a moment to hear this, and then you can email us your question or comment. Okay. In the meantime, I do see another raised hand. So I'll go ahead. John, you're back. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thanks, Haiti. Yeah, sorry, one more question. I appreciate the opportunity here. We're wondering whether all projects on the human right to water list are currently receiving state funding for some type of solution or assistance. And if they're not, could you help us understand what any barriers are to holding up that assistance, or what's preventing some of the systems from receiving solutions or assistance?
Thank you, John. I will go ahead and take this one as well. No, not all projects on the human right to water list are receiving assistance. We are currently meeting DFA with the Division of Drinking Water and our SAFER team members on a regular basis, so on a quarterly basis, to talk about all the projects on that list to try to keep them moving. And not only just doing those meetings, but those meetings are to help make sure that we continue to move those, that there is nothing stagnant. Some of the projects aren't coming to us for help. Some of them are trying to figure out their own solutions on their own, or maybe they're not eligible. Some of them we're working with them using our technical assistance providers. And some of them we just have more outreach that needs to be done. But we do have those regular meetings to figure out what the best next steps are.
Thank you, Bridget. And thank you again, John, for your question. I don't see any more raised hands, but go ahead. If you do have any questions or comment, please raise your hand or use the chat feature to type in your question or comment. And then again, those who are watching the live webcast, please email us at drinkingwatersrf@waterboards.ca.gov. So I will turn over to the team just to check to see if we have any emails. And it doesn't look like we have any we haven't received any emails, but I'll wait a moment and look forward to receiving an email or two. Okay, so folks, if we don't have any more raised hands, and we don't have any questions or comment in the chat box, and we haven't received any emails for the Drinking Water SRF IUP workshop. So what we can do now is go on, before we do have a scheduled break, but before we do that, we actually would like to hear from you. We have 4 quick poll questions that will help us know how we did today with the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund Intended Use Plan workshop. We appreciate your participation and want to assure you that all the responses to the poll questions will be anonymous. With that, Beth will launch our first poll question. Okay, so thank you, Beth. So here's the first question. How clear and easy was the information presented today? So those here on the platform, go ahead and vote. In terms of how clear and easy was the information presented today, very clear and easy to follow, clear and easy to follow, somewhat clear and easy to follow, not clear and easy to follow. And then lastly, no opinion or comment. We'll give folks a couple more seconds. Go ahead and vote. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for participating for the first question. Now we'll move on to the second question. The second question, how satisfied were you with the ability to ask questions or provide comments? Very satisfied, satisfied, somewhat satisfied, not satisfied, no opinion or comment. Great. Thank you. We have more voting, more participants voting, so that's great. I appreciate your participation. So now we'll move on to the third question. How satisfied were you with the responses to the questions or comments? Very satisfied, satisfied, somewhat satisfied, not satisfied, no opinion or comment. I'll give folks a couple more seconds. We're waiting for other folks to go ahead and cast a vote. Okay. Thank you. Great. Thank you. So last question we have for you. And so the last one is, for future workshops, I would prefer to participate via Zoom, in person, both via Zoom and in person, no opinion or comment. Couple more seconds. Okay. Great. Thank you, folks, for participating and providing your feedback. Beth, thank you for launching those polls. Again, thank you. We do appreciate your feedback. With that, we'll now take a 10-minute break. When we return, we'll move on to the Clean Water State Revolving Fund Intended Use Plan. It is a 10:47. So actually, we'll take a 13-minute break. How about that? We'll come back at 11 o'clock and we'll start with the Clean Water State Revolving Fund Intended Use Plan. So go ahead and take your break, stretch your legs, and then we'll be back at 11 o'clock. Thank you. Okay, welcome. Welcome back, everyone. For those who are just joining us, we just concluded the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund Intended Use Plan, and now we'll be discussing the Clean Water State Revolving Fund Intended Use Plan. I am Haiti Yanamine with the Office of Public Participation, and I'll be the facilitator for today's workshop. As a reminder, this workshop is being held virtually through Zoom and is being webcast publicly at video.calepa.gov. This workshop will be posted on the State Water Board's website for anyone who may not have been able to join us today. This workshop is for informational purposes and no formal action will be taken. To improve streaming quality, folks participating on the Zoom platform will have their microphones muted and videos turned off during the presentation. There will be an opportunity to ask questions and provide comments after the presentation. At that time, if you'd like to speak, please raise your hand through the reactions icon on the taskbar at the bottom of your screen. If you're calling in, raise your hand by pressing *9 on your keypad. Questions will be taken in the order they were received. Folks watching the live webcast, you can email your questions or comment with the subject as 2021-22 IUP workshop to cleanwatersrf@waterboards.ca.gov for the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. If our presentation is too big for your screen, please set your view option to exit full screen. Typically, a taskbar is found at the top of your screen, but it can also be found at the bottom of your Zoom window. The presentation of the Clean Water State Revolving Fund Intended Use Plan is also available at our website at http://bit.ly/CWSRF_2021-22_IUP. Again, this workshop is being recorded and we'll post it on the State Water Board's website. We want to thank each of you for finding a way to join us today. We're doing our best to make sure that everyone can participate in an effective way and that this time is available for you. I'd like to review some guidelines. We ask that you mute yourself when you're not speaking. If you're not speaking, we just took a break and we are halfway through this workshop. We will not be taking a break for the remainder of the workshop, but please take breaks as you need them. In case you get disconnected, please rejoin the Zoom workshop or watch the live webcast at video.calepa.ca.gov. And finally, if you need technical assistance, please email cleanwatersrf@waterboards.ca.gov. You can also raise your hand or type it into the chat on the bottom of your screen if you're on Zoom. And if you're calling in, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 on your keypad. We have staff from the Division of Financial Assistance presenting today who will be introduced in a moment. We also have staff working behind the scenes to make sure that we have as few participation bumps as possible. And we would like to thank them for making this workshop possible. Now, I'd like to introduce Leslie Loudon. Leslie Loudon is the Deputy Director in the State Water Board's Division of Financial Assistance and oversees both the Drinking Water SRF and Clean Water SRF programs. Leslie?
Well, good morning, everyone, and I want to thank you for your interest and continued participation in this workshop. I also just wanted to mention that these are very exciting times as far as infrastructure funding goes. We won't be really covering it in this workshop as this is focused strictly on the 2021-22 intended use plan, but earlier this week, Governor Newsom announced his $100 billion California comeback package, and it includes a lot of funding for drinking water and wastewater infrastructure. And the State Water Resources Control Board will be administering almost $1.5 billion for wastewater and drinking water infrastructure funding that comes from the American Rescue Plan. And then also the governor is proposing a $1 billion program to provide drinking water systems with funding to cover water arrearages from customers that weren't able to pay their debts during the pandemic, and the water boards will be administering those funds. So as this all plays out, the governor is releasing further details about that package today in his May revise. And then the legislature and the governor need to adopt the budget. And then following that, we will be working to work on guidelines and figure out how we're going to administer all this funding. So stay tuned. I'm sure there will be more information coming out about that fairly shortly. So thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Now I'd like to introduce Mike Downey. Mike Downey is a supervising engineer who oversees the drinking water and clean water state revolving fund programs. Mike?
Good morning, everyone. Almost afternoon. Yes, my name is Mike Downey, supervising engineer with Division of Financial Assistance. Like Leslie said, this intended use plan will not does not currently include anything with American Rescue Plan or other additional funding announced by Governor Newsom, and with more details to follow. But as we've done in the past, there could be opportunities to complement SRF funding and other complementary funding that we currently administer. And so we will be, figuring that out in the months to come, with the possibility of an amendment being offered for the intended use plan or other board action, like Leslie said, as we develop guidelines for those additional funds. So more to come, but at the moment, the IUP is focused on the funds we do have and have known about and understand the requirements for. And so that's what's in this intended use plan that hopefully you've had a chance to already take a quick look at. So today, I just want to go over our agenda briefly, and then I will go ahead and introduce our presenters. So if you were tuned in this morning, we already went over the Drinking Water SRF presentation. We are now going to kick off the Clean Water State Revolving Fund presentation, IUP presentation, and then we're going to make sure we have time for questions and answers. And then we will aim to be adjourned by 12:30 today. I'll note that this is workshop number 2, as has been mentioned. So the first workshop was a couple weeks ago, and we had a lot of great questions at that point. The recording of that workshop is also posted on our website. And we just wanted to give one more opportunity to ask any questions, engage with staff here at Division of Financial Assistance. And hopefully you've had a little bit more time to review the IUP document and develop those additional questions. So today, we've got 2 people helping present the clean water portion of the presentation. It's Bob Pontareri, who's a senior engineer with the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, and Bridget Chase, who's a supervising engineer working with the Office of Sustainable Water Solutions within Division of Financial Assistance. And her portion will focus on small and disadvantaged communities. So with that, I will turn it over to Bob. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Mike. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. My name is Bob Pontareri. I'm a senior engineer in the Clean Water SRF program. So a preview of our presentation today, I'm going to go over the first 3 sections covering the background and program updates and application demand. I'll then hand it off to Bridget Chase, who'll cover the disadvantaged communities section. And then I'll return and go back over the final 4 sections on financial outlook, fundable list development, our implementation, and the schedule of the IUP, and also go over submitting comments. And at the end, we'll take up questions. I'll give you a little program background. The Clean Water SRF was established in 1987. The SRF offers low interest loan funds and limited principal forgiveness, also called non-repayable financing. We do offer other state funding is also available via the legislature or voter approved propositions. And as Leslie stated, we may be getting more of that in the near future. This funding is meant to be complementary grant and loan funding that can be combined with the Clean Water SRF funds. The program itself is guided by our Clean Water SRF policy, which was last amended in December of 2019. As you can see, the program is very popular and we have a demand that is greater than $7 billion currently. IUP basics, so let's talk about that. So the IUP is available at the link shown here, and it's also available on the DFA website. The IUP is required to be submitted to US EPA annually and is included as part of our application to US EPA for our capitalization grant. Think of the IUP as our business plan. It discusses our finances, staffing, resources, goals, and approach, and lays out specific eligibility requirements to receive financing from both the Clean Water SRF and its complementary sources. So you might ask, who's an eligible applicant? So typical applicants are listed here. They include a wide variety of public agencies, nonprofits, and tribes. Applicants can also include some private entities. The best thing to do is anyone that has specific questions should contact our office for more details concerning their specific eligibility. As far as costs, typical costs include costs for planning, design, construction, construction management, and administration of a project. Also, we do allow change order contingencies to be included in the package. I would note that eligibility may be different for any of our complementary funding sources and is dependent on the ultimate funding source that is included in your package. Eligible project types. So eligible project funding is available for publicly owned treatment works projects, or POTWs as we call them, for both wastewater and stormwater. Eligible projects also include projects that address non-point source issues, estuary plans, recycled water distribution and treatment. There are many others, so please contact us for specific. Please contact us for specific details on any of those eligible projects. So you might ask, what's new? So we've currently updated all our application forms. So we have the general form, the technical form, an environmental form, and a financial form. Those are all the packages that get submitted to us. They're all up to date. They're all available on our website. We also included an executive summary in the IUP. The executive summary is provided to increase readability and is offered as a quick reference to major changes in the program and complementary sources as well. Something else that's new that's coming, it's already underway in a limited fashion. Electronic submittal of disbursement requests are now accepted. There is a current 50-page limit on the size of what can be submitted, but we hope to expand that to 200 pages in the near future. Look to your PMs to provide more details in the future on that. So you might ask, what stays the same? So we've been using FAST as our application submittal tool, and we're going to continue that. It is the preferred method, but US Postal and FedEx are also acceptable as well. The application process is, we do accept applications on a continuous basis. The deadline to submit documents for scoring purposes, however, is December 31st each year. So please keep that date in mind. The deadline is really tied to the priority scoring of projects. So if you would like to get the highest score possible, please provide the most detailed information that we need for scoring purposes by that deadline. So another thing that's staying the same is cost eligibility can begin at the notice to proceed. Big thing there is just to make sure that our environmental review unit has approved the environmental documents before you start construction. So the best thing I would say there is to always check back in with us to make sure that that's happened before you issue a notice to proceed. And also we're going to continue with the short-term financing incentive, which is to provide projects seeking a 20-year finance term or less in interest rate reduction of 0.25%. So current application demand. Overall application demand is very high in the SWRF program. We currently have 60 projects on the fundable list that we call rollovers. They total about 4.5 billion. Disadvantaged community projects, there's about 114 for 459 million. Projects that were subject to scoring, we scored 43 projects this year, about $2 billion worth. And then we also have a new category here, projects that are subject to being suspended or removed from the consideration. Those projects
I wish I could go make food. Thank you.
26 projects are subject to suspension or removal due to inactivity, non-responsiveness, or they were requested to withdraw during our scoring process. So that brings us to a total of 235 projects in-house that we're currently looking at, with a total of about 7.5 billion. Thank you, and now I'd like to hand off to Bridget, who will present the small disadvantaged community section of our presentation.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Bob. Again, my name is Bridget Chase, and I'm from the division's Office of Sustainable Water Solutions. The slides I will be presenting are specific to small community wastewater funding. So the first slide includes helpful definitions that we use in the Clean Water Intended Use Plan. If you listened to the drinking water presentation earlier this morning, you may notice that the definition for a small community for wastewater projects is less than 20,000 people, while drinking water uses a population of less than 10,000 people. A community is considered disadvantaged if their median household income, or MHI, is less than 80% of the statewide MHI, and they are considered severely disadvantaged, or SDAC, if their MHI is less than 60% of the statewide MHI. Small disadvantaged communities are not included on the fundable list that is in the IUP because we don't require these applications to be ranked or scored to be added to the list. However, due to the current demand on small community wastewater funding and the limited funds available, we have identified priority projects that DFA staff will work on. If a small DAC would like assistance preparing an application or potentially with some necessary planning work, we also have technical assistance available. The draft intended use plan identifies projects that DFA will consider as priority for small community wastewater funding. These priorities include public health projects, projects that address violations of waste discharge requirements or NPDES permits, septic to sewer or regional projects, or other projects identified by the regional boards as priority. We plan to prioritize construction funding and are proposing a maximum of 10% of the available grant and principal forgiveness funds to go towards planning projects. This year, we propose increasing the cap per community from 10 million to 12 million over a 5-year period. The following table can be found in Appendix E of the draft intended use plan. Small disadvantaged communities may receive up to 100% planning grant for a project with a maximum grant available of $500,000 per project. If a community receives a planning grant or principal forgiveness for the project, the amount dispersed to the community under planning will be subtracted from the maximum eligible construction grant or principal forgiveness available. This table shows available construction grant or principal forgiveness available for small community wastewater projects. Small severely disadvantaged communities may receive up to 100% grant for their project regardless of their wastewater rates. Small disadvantaged communities must have wastewater rates of at least 1.5% of their MHI to qualify for grant or principal forgiveness and may be eligible for up to 75% grant or PF. Small non-DAC communities may be eligible for up to 50% grant or PF if their wastewater rates are at least 4% of their MHI. Projects may receive up to $30,000 per connection for a maximum of $6 million total. The grant and principal forgiveness caps are higher for septic to sewer or regional projects and allow for up to $75,000 per connection for a maximum grant of $10 million. I would like to highlight that any planning grants or principal forgiveness received for a project counts towards what a community may receive for a construction project. Septic to sewer and regional project funding caps are determined on a per community basis rather than a per project basis. For example, if the project regionalizes or connects 3 distinct communities, it could potentially receive up to $30 million. We also considered smaller projects that will serve a limited amount of residential connections and are proposing to be able to approve grant or principal forgiveness funding for up to $2 million regardless of the amount per service connection. So this is the last of my slides, and I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to Bob from here, but I'll be available for questions after. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Bridget. So let's take a look at recent financing from the SRF and its complementary sources. Total financing shown includes projects subject to scoring, not subject to scoring, and complementary sources. As you can see, 2020 was our highest recent year. We had significant improvement over the previous year in agreement executions, and we were getting back to our normal levels after the 2019 fiscal implementation, when we were hit with the COVID pandemic, which shifted us to 100% telework during 2020. We hope to regain our momentum in the remainder of 2021 and reach a new normal for the program in 2022. We currently are estimating that this year we'll hit about 40 agreements and $600 million. I can say that we're on pace to probably slightly exceed the 600 million. And at last check, there's currently 37 projects that are currently in the queue for a contract. In other words, all approvals have been made. They're just working their way through getting the executed agreement. So I think that we'll be above the 40 projects as well there. So the SRF financial outlook. So the 21-22 SRF loan capacity average is 600 million for loans. This is a long range target for the program, and also we have available complementary funding that's available is about 111 million in the form of grant and principal forgiveness, which is limited to small DACs only. And also note that PF is not available to Green Project Reserve projects this year. There is also limited funds available for water recycling projects, totaling about 45.1 for construction grants. Construction grants are limited at 22 million remains to execute. There's a 5 million per project cap that applies to construction grants as well. There's approximately 20 million available for water recycling planning studies, and they have a cap of 150,000. There's currently 3 million in water recycling funding program loan funds, but those are expected to be exhausted this year. And basically those loans have the same terms as a clean water SRF loan. And I would note that loans are also always available for water recycling projects from the SRF as well. And obviously these numbers are subject to change based on what we get from the rescue plan. So more to come on that in the future. the Clean Water SRF lending capacity. So the lending capacity for the program, as they said, is 600 million this year, which is slightly higher than last year. The lending capacity ensures the long-term stability and is a goal determined by staff and our financial advisor. The lending capacity, I would note, does not affect rollover projects, and it also does not affect small disadvantaged applicants. Fundable list. The fundable list identifies projects DFA expects to finance during the fiscal year. Only projects on the fundable list are eligible to be funded, and they remain on the list until a funding agreement is executed. However, projects are subject to removal or suspension if determined to be ineligible, inactive, non-responsive, or withdrawn at the applicant's request. Since demand far exceeds the SRF's loan capacity, we definitely can see that ranking and scoring of projects is warranted. The exception is small disadvantaged communities and public health projects are automatically included and they do not receive a priority score. As I stated, the yearly loan capacity is 600 million, so staff are required to target a funding range between 90% and 125%. Therefore, the funding levels this year are going to range between 540 million to 750 million. Scoring and ranking. So the priority score is comprised of three components. The primary score of up to 9 points, which is set by the Clean Water SRF policy. There's also a secondary score of up to 3 points and a readiness score of up to 4 points. Both of those, the secondary and the readiness score, are applicant driven. In other words, they're based off of actions that the applicant has taken themselves, and that's how those scores are attained. The maximum score is 16 points. The cutoff score is determined so that all scored cutoff score is determined for all projects. The priority score details are shown on the Clean Water SRF comprehensive list. All projects with similar scores are either in or out based on funding target range. So if all the 13s were to fit in a range, they would all be in. So that's kind of how we work it. So we would move, if they didn't fit into the ranges, then we would go to the next rank. Okay, so developing the fundable list. So staff begins scoring projects in January of 21 this year. Scores are compiled and reviewed by DFA staff and provided to applicants for review and comments. We are currently in the public review process, which is the blue box shown on the slide. Next, we will address comments from this workshop and the previous workshop held the other day, about 2 weeks ago. Then present the proposed IUP, which includes the fundable list, to the State Water Board at the June 15th meeting for adoption. So 3 financing scenarios were developed. There were no projects that received a score of 16 or 15 points. So we'll start with scenario A. Scenario A has a cutoff score, it's 14 points, which includes all projects scoring at least 14 points. The funding amount for that scenario is below the 90% minimum range. This scenario had 6 projects totaling 64 million. So if we look at scenario B, the cutoff score there was 13 points, which means it includes all projects scoring 13 points or higher. Funding amount is still below the minimum range. Scenario B would include 13 projects totaling about 145 million. If you recall, we had to be at a minimum range of 540 million. So if you look at scenario C, the cutoff score there, it's 12 points, includes all projects scoring 12 points or higher. It does fit nicely between the upper and lower range of our funding ranges. It funds 21 projects totaling 720 million. So this is just a graphical representation of what we were just talking about. So as you can see, scenario A and B are well below the 540 million range. Scenario C at 720 million fits well, is in the range, so it's good. So that one would add 21 projects and have a funding total of about 720 million. So a little housekeeping on the two lists. So staff has identified projects that have not progressed. They're either inactive or not ready to proceed to a funding agreement. The fundable list has 9 such projects that are subject to be removed. The comprehensive list has 17 projects subject to removal. And overall, there were a total of 26 projects that are subject to being removed. Recommendation. So DFA management is still concerned about setting unrealistic goals at the beginning of the year. To that end, staff were tasked to develop a fundable list that will accomplish clearing the backlog of rollover projects by the end of the 22 fiscal year. So staff recommends scenario C with a cutoff score of 12 points. Scenario C provides 720 million in funding, adds 21 projects, and they fit nicely into our funding range. And it also does not require us to implement partial funding for any of the projects. So they would all be funded at full value. Let's talk about the schedule. So posted the IUP for a 30-day public comment back on April 22nd. We held the first workshop on April 29th, and we're currently holding today's workshop. Today's May 14th. Deadline to submit comments is Monday, May 24th. And then we'll consider the adoption of the IUP at the June 15th State Water Board meeting. Okay, so how do you go about submitting comments? So details on the notice of opportunity to comment. So written comments are due by noon, May 24th. And please use the subject line comment letter, June 15th, 2021 board meeting, CWSRF IUP. You can email those to comment letters at waterboards.ca.gov. You can also mail them directly to the clerk to the board, Janine Townsend, State Water Resources Control Board, 1001 I Street, 24th floor, Sacramento, California, 95814. You're also always welcome to present oral comments at the board meeting. We're expecting the board meeting to be held via Zoom on June 15th, 2021. And we'd also like to thank those that attended our previous workshop for submitting comments. We have received several of those, and we just want to acknowledge that we do have those comments, and we're hoping to address them. Questions can be emailed to the address shown above, or for those on Zoom, please use the raise your hand function or the chat function. Thank you for joining us today. This completes my presentation, and we are now available to answer questions. And I will now hand it off to Haiti.
Thank you, Bob. And thank you, Bridget, for your presentation. Now we will transition to taking questions from both Zoom participants and from the Clean Water State Revolving Fund email. As a reminder to folks participating on Zoom, if you have a question or comment, please raise your hand through the Zoom reactions icon or use the chat feature on the taskbar at the bottom of your screen. For those calling in, please press *9 on your keypad to raise your hand if you have a question or would like to make a comment. I'll introduce you when it's your turn, and you can press *6 to unmute yourself. When your name is called, please provide your first and last name, who you're representing today, and please do your best to keep your question or comment to 3 minutes. For folks watching the live webcast, you can email your question or comment to cleanwatersrf@waterboards.ca.gov. www.swrcb.ca.gov with the subject as 2021-22 IUP workshop. In terms of procedure, I'll start with the raised hands, then we'll move on to the chat box. Question or comment will be taken in the order they were received. When it's your turn, I will introduce you and you will receive a request through Zoom to unmute yourself. We kindly ask you to be mindful of the limited time we have here today and keep questions and comments succinct. After the Zoom participants, we will take questions and comments from the Clean Water SRF email. In the event we are unable to take all the questions from folks, you can also email us at cleanwatersrf@waterboards.ca.gov, and staff will respond to those questions after the workshop. All right, I would like to now introduce Bob, Bridget, and Mike, who will be responding to questions. And folks on the Zoom platform, raise your hand if you do have any questions or would like to make a comment. This is the time that we will take your question and comment. And then if you'd like to include your question or comment in the chat box, you can do that also, and we will take those after the raised hand. So folks, feel free to do that. And again, for folks who are watching the live webcast, you can email us at cleanwatersrf@waterboards.ca.gov and provide your question or comment. Okay, so now I do see Crystal Gonzalez. Crystal, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, yes, good morning, almost afternoon. This is Crystal Gonzalez. I'm speaking on behalf of Clean Water Action. Thank you for your time and for providing these presentations. It's been informative. This is more of a comment. So for both IUPs, we noticed that they're missing kind of some metrics to ensure that projects are being completed, and residents' needs are being addressed in a timely fashion. We feel that the IOP should look at the entire project timeline, that it would be helpful from initial request to project completion, and kind of develop target timelines for how long it takes to complete each component, just so that we can, really kind of streamline or understand better the process or where there's needed support in certain areas. And yeah, we think this would, allow staff to identify and focus on key barriers and challenges to make it, more accessible. Let's see. And then I just have one kind of question in terms of, the potential to develop a wastewater needs assessment to better gauge the funding needs and gaps for the coming years. I think we've heard, I heard some pretty, you all provided some informative information on that. So I'm thinking kind of similar to the needs assessment that was conducted by for SAFER. And so, yeah, we know that as the state moves, more into a severe drought, water quality problems become more acute. And so I think it'd be really important. We believe it'd be really important to kind of have that better understanding and engage the need now and into the future. And that's all for me. Thank you so much for the opportunity to.
Thanks, Crystal, for the comment. And as far as the question on needs survey, I'll mention one thing, and then I'm sure Bridget would love to chime in more too. So part of the SRF programs is a needs survey that's performed supposedly every 4 years. The drinking water needs survey. So this is different than the needs assessment that was taking place, kind of revolving around the SAFER funds, but it is a national needs survey that we're required to do in order to help EPA allocate funds to all, as I say, 50 states plus Puerto Rico that have SRF programs. So the drinking water needs survey is going on right now, and that'll be used to distribute, the proportion of SRF funds in the future. And the clean water needs survey will be taking place next year as soon as drinking water finishes up. So it may not overlap exactly with the communities you're thinking of, but it is meant to be a semi-comprehensive survey of wastewater, I guess not just wastewater, clean water needs for the state of California. So that is something that we're currently part of work groups right now and gearing up for that will take place next year. But something that may be more linked to SAFER, I'll let Bridget speak to.
Yes, thanks, Mike. Crystal, the one thing I wanted to say as far as what SAFER has been doing as far as the identifying the needs, there were a lot of additional staff that was put into that SAFER program and a lot of staff time that was used to develop those. So at this time, we're not planning on doing that. Not to say that we won't do that in the future, but it is a lot of additional work on the staff side.
And I'd like to add as well, part of the question had to do with the follow-up on projects. So that would be, I would target you to look at our annual report, because we do have an exhibit in there that talks about all the projects that were executed during the year. And then we also have another exhibit table which show the reasons behind other projects that didn't get executed that were expected to be executed. And so we do give some basic reasoning why they didn't get executed in that fiscal year.
And then one other additional thing I would like to say too is we are continually looking at our process as far as how we could improve how quickly we process applications, and seeing if there's anything that we could do as far as revising our application documents and our review as well to try to speed up that process.
Thank you, Bridget, Bob, and Mike. And Crystal, thank you for your comment and question. And again, this is the time to raise your hand if you have any questions or comment. So we'll wait for folks to raise their hand. And also feel free to use the chat feature and type in your question or comment if you like. And those again watching the live webcast, you can email us at cleanwatersrf@waterboards.ca.gov. Bob, would you like to say something? You're unmuted.
No, I didn't have anything to say.
Okay. And again, there is a 30 to 60-second lag between the workshop and the live webcast. So we'll give folks a couple minutes to submit their comments or question to cleanwatersrf@waterboards.ca.gov.
And while we're waiting, I'll just add on to the last question one more thing. It is, like Bridget said, we are constantly trying to look at how we can streamline or improve our processes. And actually, some of the silver lining of this year was making big steps towards more electronic processes. And so I think we're looking forward to the future and continuing with that. One other thing I'll mention is that a concrete step is that we're working with Environmental Finance Center, who has an office up here in Sacramento at Sac State University, and they're doing a kind of third-party management review of programmatic management review of our SRF program, kind of focused on clean water SRF, but obviously the way we run things that impacts our complementary funding sources, our drinking water SRF program. And so, they're going to help us look at where some improvements could be made, how we compare to some of the other large SRF programs in other states, and just looking for those streamlining opportunities. So, internally, we're talking about that constantly, but we are getting some help from outside, and that's a report that we're hoping to have some findings on kind of fall of this year. So it's just getting kicked off now, but just one other thing that, hopefully we'll have some good findings for us.
Thank you, Mike, for that information. And we're still waiting for folks to provide a comment or maybe ask a question. So please feel free to raise your hand here on the Zoom platform by going to the reactions icon at the bottom of your screen. There's a taskbar. You can raise your hand there, or you can also use the chat feature to type in your question or comment. So I'll give folks a couple minutes to do that. And I know it's getting close to lunchtime, but we're here for you and we want to hear from you. So feel free to just raise your hand or ask a question, provide your comment. We would love to hear from you. In the meantime, I'm going to check in with our staff if there are any emails, but feel free to raise your hand and I'll come back to you. Okay, I just received confirmation from LNAS. LNAS, thank you for letting me know that we don't have any emails, but Mike, I think you responded to Crystal's question in the chat. Will the findings report be available to the public? I think you did. Is that correct?
Oh, I did not. Thanks for pointing that out. Yes, that is the plan right now, is that we would definitely make that public. I think we've talked with Environmental Finance Center of potentially presenting before the State Water Board, any findings that they find. So that'll be developed, exactly what format that would be. But yes, the idea would be to as transparent as possible with that.
Great. Thank you, Mike, and Crystal, thank you for your question. Okay. Last call. If you have any questions or have a comment, please raise your hand or type it in the chat feature. Also, folks watching the live webcast, email us at cleanwatersrf@waterboards.ca.gov. And shoot us an email, just let us know if you have any questions or comment. Okay. All right, we have a quiet group this close to afternoon. So before we move to closing and next steps, we would like for you to tell us your thoughts on today's workshop with the Clean Water State Revolving Fund Intended Use Plan presentation. If you could just indulge us for a minute more to complete this quick poll. We have 4 quick poll questions that will help us know how we did today with the Clean Water State Revolving Fund Intended Use Plan presentation. We appreciate your feedback and participation and want to assure you that all responses to the poll questions will be anonymous. With that, Beth will launch our first poll question. So our first poll question, how clear and easy was the information presented today? Those on Zoom, you can answer whether it was very clear and easy to follow, clear and easy to follow, somewhat clear and easy to follow, not clear and easy to follow, no opinion or comment. I'll give folks a few more seconds. So go ahead and vote on this question, whether the information presented today was clear and easy. to follow. Okay, great. Now we can move on to poll number 2. And how satisfied were you with the ability to ask questions or provide comments? Very satisfied, satisfied, somewhat satisfied, not satisfied, no opinion or comment. I'll wait a few more seconds for more folks to vote. Okay, now we'll move on to question number 3. How satisfied were you with the responses to the questions or comments? Very satisfied, satisfied, somewhat satisfied, not satisfied, no opinion or comment. A few more seconds, folks. Thank you. Okay, any more before we close the third poll question? Okay, so now we'll move on to the last question. For future workshops, I would prefer to participate via Zoom, in person, both via Zoom and in person, no opinion or comment. Okay, great. Thank you folks for participating in our poll questions. I do appreciate your feedback. And thank you, Beth, for launching those poll questions. I appreciate your help with that. So as we approach the close of our workshop, we want to recap some next steps. As Bob mentioned earlier also, written comments on Clean Water SRF intended use plan are due on May 24th, 2021 at noon. Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. It looks like it's June 15 on the PowerPoint. My apologies. And then you can put the subject line as comment letter, June 15, 2021, board meeting dash CWSRF IUP. And for the drinking water comments, for the drinking water SRF intended use plan, that is on June 1st at noon. And the subject line can be comment letter, June 15, 2021, board meeting, DWSRF IUP. You can also mail your comment letter to Janine Townsend, clerk to the board, State Water Resources Control Board, 1001 I Street, 24th floor, Sacramento, California, 95814. And we want to thank folks who have submitted the written comments, and we look forward to receiving written comments from other folks as well.
Katie, real quick, I just wanted to clarify that the IUPs will be presented at the June 15th board meeting, but the written comments are due on May 24th for clean water, like the slide says, and June 1st for the drinking water IUP. So slightly different dates that they're due. They're due by noon on those dates, so that we can compile them and get them ready for the board meeting.
Great. Thank you for that clarification, Mike. I appreciate that. Both intended use plans will be agenda items at the June 15, 2021 board meeting. Board meetings are held via Zoom. If you would like to provide oral comments, please visit the State Water Board's remote meeting page for more information. The public comment process of board meeting is very similar to the process we use today. So now As we close the workshop for today, I want to thank the Division of Financial Assistance and Office of Public Participation for their work in putting this workshop together. I also want to thank, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of you for joining us today. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to contact us at cleanwatersrf@waterboards.ca.gov for the Clean Water State Revolving Fund Intended Use Plan, or at drinkingwatersrf@waterboards.ca.gov for the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund Intended Use Plan. Okay, we will adjourn. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Have a good rest of your day. Thank you.